as a belittling of the importance of scientific management. Regardless of the criticism, this scientific approach will be always required at any job of repetitive nature, and the job done by Frederick Taylor is worth appreciating. We do present criticism both from the inside and outside. Inside, we discussed that the context was that the job might be boring and monotonous, but we also discussed then that the Taylor faced such heavy criticism to the extent that the parliament demanded a testimony regarding the system being anti-labor. This testimony could have considered the most powerful exposition of his ideas and as he went on to refer to an experiment where he was working on the design of cutting tool which included two alloys and that were to be mixed along with 11 such variables, and this would help. How he worked on it was that he would keep 10 of the variables constant at a time and would change one variable until they worked out for the best combination of that for that certain variable. For example, for the cutting tool, he figured out that if we have a stream of water running on the fixed point, then it will be easy for convenient for cutting. Also, that Taylor concluded his speech by drawing parallels between the modern day surgeon and the scientific management expert, that how they are both similar in their approaches. Like how a surgeon would demand his interns to first learn his way and master it, and then he would allow them to be creative or move forward from there. Uh, in case just in case if they were to amputate a leg, the surgeon won't allow it to be done anyway other than the way he would teach. Taylor also said that there is no originality in the scientific management theory. He may be the forefront for proposing the scientific management, but he just rather pooled the thoughts or the common wisdom of the worker, which were already there and just disorganized. He further argued that no creativity is completely his, and the complete creativity went to the workers, and they were all the workers' inventions and their creativity, and nothing was his. Anyone who anyone who argued for the latter, that the creativity is his, would be considered a poor man. Uh, but then again, we have the example of Henry Ford, who was an exponent for this idea, and he would have pushed this idea so far that an incident you described was that clearly depicted how much the scientific management affected and went to the head of the people working. That when there was a technical breakthrough among the workers of the assembly line workers, that they had a celebratory lunch, and for that they had this lunch served on a conveyor belt. So this showed kind of the misinterpretation of the scientific approach. So we analyze that this analyzing of the job and identifying its key point is important, but that doesn't mean that we could not put it back together and make it a whole job. Nobody prevented that, and Taylor also didn't ever intended that. The expression that the practitioner of the concept are more loyal than the king and might push the notion of division of labor too heavily, which may not be the original intent. This creates a problem, and this is what happened with the scientific management. We then discuss how the context changed and exposed the limitation and production oriented approach of the scientific management, and how the entire focus is on increasing the productivity. This was further exposed by World War One and the Great Depression followed by it. And this was the first development that occurred. The second development was that during this Great Depression, the workers were realized that they were working hard. They are rather throwing themselves out by the pink slip. This led to they worked so hard, and there was a huge pileup in the inventory, which led to them being unemployed, and this led to a mass unemployment, leading to protest. This also led to the rise of labor movements throughout the 1920s, and also this led to the formation of the first Indian trade union that in 1925, that is known as the All Indian Trade Union Congress. This system of pushing people out of job was opposed by the whole world. This was the second development in the organization of the laborer. They claimed that they work hard and enough, and not selling of the product is the management problems. The third or the major development that occurred was which was also the base of the second school of management thought, that is the human relations school, was based on the Hawthorne experiment. Hawthorne is a place in US, and Uh, there was a General Electricity company which had a factory there, and a group of experiments like another scientific experiments were taking place there. There were experiments with the impact of illumination on the productivity, and they initially hypothesized that the better intensity of light would lead to better production. But two groups were formed, and namely the control group and the experiment group, and they were experimented with. The control group was provided with a fixed intensity of light throughout the experiment, and the experimental group was in the experimental group, the intensity of light was varied. Initially it was dim, and then it was increased, and then it was again decreased. But what the surprising result they gained was that even on initially on increasing the intensity of light, the productivity did increase. But even on reducing the intensity, the productivity kept on increasing. This experiment initially was mulled over by the researchers, and the result and the on the result, and the later dismissed it at there was some fluke, and they further dropped the experiments. The control group also demonstrated a deviation from the result, or the initial hypothesis. Even under the controlled environment or the controlled intensity of light, the productivity was rising continuously. So the one conclusion they drew out of all this was the light intensity has nothing to do with the productivity, and they almost dropped the experiment. This is when Elton Mayo, who later came out to be known as the father of human relation movement, stepped into the experiment. He tried to decipher what is happening, but rather than just observing, he went on to the ground zero and actually talked to the workers and discussed with them what was actually happening. So, in this conversation, what made him realize was that the reason for change in productivity is actually the sense of importance the workers have gained over working there. The design of experiment was such that the workers were brought out from their routine work environment, routine work surrounding, and were subjected to the studies. The supervisors who were supervising them here were the researchers, and not their usual supervisors who were naturally breathing down their necks. This new supervision was far more humane, and that somehow made them bond over the period of 9 years that the experiment lasted. All this provided them with some sense of novelty, and thus the reason for the increase in productivity. The result of one of the experiment was that there was a series of other experiments also. So for one of the experiment, the result was that there was even in the case of the temptation to increase the productivity, they didn't increase the productivity to protect the weaker workers, uh, lest they are exposed. They compromised the workers who had the learnings. They compromised their learnings in order to protect the weak workers. This was all because of the social
We've lost you, Sadia. What happened? I think she's already through. So, Samir, you can start the presentation.
Yes, sir. I mean,
Okay, please start.
am I audible, sir?
Yes, very much.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you are well. My name is Mohammed Samir, and first of all, I'll thank to sir for giving me this opportunity to recap the yesterday's discussion on criticism of scientific school of management, which was the first organized method of management. It became very much practiced by organization to improve efficiency. But when the limitation of scientific management appeared, Frederick Taylor, who introduced the scientific management, was criticized to the extent that even in parliament, this question was raised that his system is anti labor, and he was asked to give testimony. In fact, Sir discussed the last part of Taylor's speech where he said, uh, he draws a parallel between exponent of scientific management thought and the modern day surgeon. And he says modern day surgeon is the best example of scientific management expert. His, he said how he teaches his interns this art of surgery. Uh, did the surgeon say do it the way you like? But not. The surgeon would say, first learn my way. Uh, First learn my way, which I have learned the hard way. He said actually there is no originality in scientific management. He said I am not creative. The worker are creative. They must uh, they must know the ways. I just systemize it. So some thus the practice, some they are the practitioner push the idea too far. It was because it was become part of their life. So much that they push the motion too far. And yes, analyzing the job, identifying all the meaningful tasks that are to be performed in job is very important analyst, but dividing it into parts that doesn't mean that we can't put it together again and make a complete whole of that job. So sometimes it is like we are more loyal to the king and creates the problem with scientific management, and that actually expose the limitation of scientific management where your entire focus on increasing production. And one of the reasons which expose limitation of scientific management is during World War. The countries are on economic recession, then the consumers save the funds and uses as all stable goods. And if employers are performing well and production running good as well, then inventory pile up. Due to unselling of products, then managers have to fire employers. This led to increase in unemployment. They're working hard and throwing them and throwing themselves out of the job because extra production was not required. And and then what workers do? They started protesting against this injustice. And in fact, 1920s is the period of labor movement world over. Then another limitation occurs in Hawthorne experiment. Hawthorne is a place in US. It was a General Electric company. There also a group of experiment started, and the experiment was they wanted to see illumination, the intensity of light on production. The hypothesis was if there will be better intensity of light, then there will be better production. Two groups were formed: control group, where the intensity of light at a uniform rate, but in experiment group it was changed, and it was started with very low level of light and its intensity was increased, brought up to a good level, and then the intensity decreases. But when the illumination was reduced, the production, it didn't go down. Production didn't go down. It's actually continued to rise. And they were shocked and thought that when they reduce the light, the productivity will go down. But it didn't happen like this. And interestingly, in the control group, where the intensity level was maintained at a cost level, constant level, there also the productivity was rising continuously. So they understood that illumination has no impact on productivity. And the experiment also dropped because it didn't stand on those expectations. And at that time, Alton Mio, Alton Mio, who was father of human relation movement, got involved in the experiment and decides to have a word with workers on the situation. And after the interaction, he got some realization that actually what is causing the change in productivity is the sense of importance that they have got from this experience. And actually, in a nutshell, what he said that it is sense of important. they got through these experience, which actually responsible in the increase in productivity. Because human supervision and social bonding with each other leads to increase in productivity. Because a man is not just an economic man, but also a social man. So that's it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Samir and Sadia, and earlier Ahmad Saeed Hayan and Mohammad Danish.
So excuse me, sir.
Yes, Sadia.
So shall I continue from where I stopped or disconnected? Shall I conclude at least the report?
Okay, conclude, please. But please open your video.
Okay, sir. Yes. So as I was saying, the third development that happened, that was the base for the second school of management thought, or the relationships, the human relations school, was that the development was based on the Hawthorne experiment. Hawthorne is a place in US and had a factory for the General Electricity Company. A group of experiments, like other scientific experiments, were carried out, and they were experimenting with the impact of. Okay. They were experimenting with the impact of intensity of light on the production. And the initial hypothesis was the better the intensity of light would be, the more would be the production. The two groups were formed, namely the control group and the experimental group. And in the control group, the intensity of light would maintain at a uniform rate, and in the experimental group, it was varied. Initially, it was low, and then it was gradually increased, and then after reaching a certain level, it was further decreased. What came as a surprise was that the production on the experimental group, even on decreasing the intensity of light, the productivity didn't go down. The result of the experiment was mulled over by the researchers, and then they concluded that there might be some fluke in this, and then they further was on the verge of dropping the experiment. What also There was also a slight mm, deviation in the result from the control group, and that was that even on the maintaining constant intensity of light, some a constant increase in the productivity. So the only one conclusion that they could lead from this was that there is no impact of intensity of light on the productivity. And this was also when Elton Mayo stepped in, who later came to be known as the father of the human relationship management. He tried to decipher what is actually happening, and he went on to ground zero and actually talked to the workers to know what led to this change in the initial hypothesis. The conversation that he made him realize that the reason for this change in productivity is actually the sense of importance that they have gained working under the experiments. The design of experiment was such that they were taken out from their initial work environments and were put under a particular study. And the supervisors who were here were the researchers, and they were far more human than the supervisors they had, who were constantly breathing down their necks. And this lasted for around 9 years, which made them develop a kind of social bond between them. So uh, one of the other experiments uh, who had a different result, was that when there was a need for increasing the productivity, even then the workers drew back from increasing the productivity uh, for safe keep the exposure of the weak workers, and they held back their learnings to protect the weaker workers. All this led to Elton May suggesting that man is not just a social man, and man is not just an economic man but a social man as well. And the human nature of the emphasis on the nature of the gregarious nature of the man, and that it would like to be a part of the social group. We concluded yesterday's class with this. And all these three, and we discussed how these three developments cumulatively led to the human relationship school of management thought, and we concluded the class with it. And today we are to discuss what led to the rise of the behavioral school of management. And the one statement that you made was the final kick is the realization of own potential. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sadia. So let me comment now on the presentations, starting with Ahmed Saeed, who is from Delhi, and then with BTech in mechanical, and he wants to be an entrepreneur in the automobile sector. So there's a lot of coherence or connect between his background and his aspirations. And this question that he raised, many of us may be faced with this issue of procrastination, and that is because we are not able to set our priorities right. I think one simple thing that some elders have advised me, that be in the habit of maintaining a diary. I mean, to do kind of list. You know your priorities, and then yes, necessary things should be focused first. But sometimes what happens is that possible things takes precedence over necessary things. So if we are able to distinguish what is necessary and what is possible, focus on necessary. Once we are through with the necessary things, then we can focus on possible also, isn't it? So if we can make that judgment, I think that would be great. And then saying no to others would also be easy because we have our own priorities very clearly laid out, isn't it? For a particular day, which would ultimately get linked to some of the life goals that we have set for ourselves, isn't it? So, in fact, that may give you an opportunity to reflect back on as to where your time is being spent in a particular day. So that may be one of the method. Then Danish says that he's a player. He plays volleyball, and he has represented his school in that sport. That's a good thing, and maybe he needs to understand more specifically how can he leverage his background for his career aspirations. And he says that his weakness is curiosity, but I would say it's a strength. But whether it's a strength or not, he has to ask this question to himself because he has not asked enough questions in the class. In the last 12 watt classes we have engaged together. So, what kind of curiosity or where it gets aroused? Maybe in one-to-one conversation it gets aroused. I don't know. That he has to ask for himself. But if it is there, then it's actually a strength. One should ask questions,
Sure, sir.
and one should ask right kind of questions, isn't it? And there is a couplet which says that किसी को अपने अमल का हिसाब क्या देते, सवाल सारे गलत थे, जवाब क्या देते. We should ask right questions that provoke others to, or maybe helps clarify the issues. That is why we encourage questions. So if there are some doubts, that has to be clear. Now coming to this recap presentations by Sadia and Samir. Overall, Sadia, you did a good job. Very content-rich presentation. You covered all the points. But mind you, it is not. The expectation is that it's a recap, isn't it? So, and the time limit is set for that reason only. That is maximum 5 minutes, isn't it? So, time management has to be uh, there in a presentation. So, your presentation got lengthened a bit, and maybe you have to focus a bit more on your delivery part. What happens is you have good command over language, you have written down the text, but sometimes what happens is if we depend too heavily on the text, the natural flow is missing, isn't it? Sometimes we are speaking too fast, sometimes we are not speaking that fast, and there are uh, pauses in between. So maybe just uh, have a relook at your flow of delivery. To me, it appeared that most of the time you were a bit too fast while you were speaking. And maybe that was because you were too heavily dependent on the written text. Then, Samir, to you, my advice would be actually opposite to what Sadia has said. You have to work on your flow of delivery, and that can come about when you write what you are going to say, because that will help you clarify the ideas. uh, उनमें तालमेल बिठाना आसान हो जाता है. And then when you speak, you will be able to speak more fluently. Your presentation was moving in a bit of a halting manner, isn't it? It was not very smooth delivery. Otherwise, you had full good command over content. You covered all the points, but writing will make it more crisp. This is one of the element of a good presentation: crispness.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So now let us get on with today's session. Actually, we have already shared with you that scientific management school is one we have covered, and then we have talked about human relations school. But there is another school which has emerged, which is part of that classical schools of management thought that we have. The first scientific management we have already covered in that. The second school is proposed by Henry Fayol, who was an industrialist. And this difference you have to keep in mind when this issue is discussed, that his perspective is that of an industrialist, the top man. Taylor's perspective was that of a shop floor person, isn't it? So both of them approached this issue of management, but from a different perspective. One, that of a shop floor, the maybe the bottom perspective, and bottom up kind of approach. And as opposed to that, Henry Fayol proposed it from the perspective of top. Mm. So, Dr. Zareen, will you initiate conversation on that account?
Thank you, sir. Like sir just mentioned, that Taylor always focused more on management functions, and the idea of Froll was of total organizations. So he was more focused on totality, on a holistic view. And just to give a brief introduction of Henry Fayol, he was a French industrialist, like Sir just mentioned, and in 1900 he helped a company to completely change itself. There was a company which was a French company which was at the verge of bankruptcy, but Fayol joined it and proposed. Sir, am I audible, sir? Sir, is my voice clear?
Yes, your voice was audible.
Yes, ma'am.
So Henry Fayol proposed a plan. He proposed ideas through which the organization went through complete change, and it managed to come out of the verge of bankruptcy. And at the time when Henry Fayol retired in 1918 from that organization, it was one of the top organizations. And after the retirement, Henry Fayol wrote a book which is General and Industrial Administration. And in that, Henry Fayol proposed 14 principles of management. Since he always focused on the totality, the holistic view of organization, he proposed 14 principles of management, which he thought that all organizations must follow and implement. So I shall share a slide with you which states those 14 principles, and then we can discuss those one by one?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, can you please repeat the name of the book?
Okay, it's General and Industrial Administration by Henry Fayol in 1949. Is the slide visible to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So we will discuss the 14 principles of management. I just gave you a brief introduction of Fayol, and we shall move on to the 14 principles of management which he had proposed. These are like this: division of labor, authority, discipline, unity of command. So these are the 14 principles, and let us discuss each one by one. So, division of labor, division of work. He meant that division of work is important because everybody is a is specializing in different areas. So, according to him, the division of work should be on the basis of the specialization, so that the individuals can work best and efficiently. Division of work leads to specialization. So because it helps in producing better work with the same effort. We can understand it also with the help of an example. See, in an organization there are people, maybe we all are MBAs, so if we join an organization we might be expected to do, operations work as well, or marketing work. But if we are placed in any organization on the basis of our specialization, maybe if any one of us is good in accounting, and if he is given the work of maybe marketing or operations, then maybe he may not be able to do that well, which he could have done if he gets the work of accounting. And it could be applied to other areas as well. So the person should be allotted work according to the specialization. Now, if we see what could be the advantages of this, that if we place people according to the specialization and there is division of work on the basis of a specialization, then see, it avoids repetition of work, because maybe I'm not able to do the accounting work that well, and then I might need help of an accountant, so that whole work would be done again. So that time will be saved, and that repetition of work will be saved if we can have the people who are already specialized in their work. And that will also reduce wastage of resources, and work can be finished early with less resources. And also the person who knows his job will be feeling more responsible towards the job, right? Because if I may not be very comfortable with accounting, then I may not be feeling very responsible, and I may be dependent on the other person for the job. And of course, efficiency of work increases. We are able to do work more effectively. And if and Fayol suggested that if this is not implemented, if division of work is not followed, then there will be lack of specialization, and people will not be very effective and efficient in their work. So this is one. This is the first principle of management given by Fayol: division of work. The next principle is authority and responsibility. In this, what happens that we see that what is authority? Can anybody tries to suggest?
Ma'am, the right to do something, the
Okay,
power to do something.
okay,
Any formal
Ownership.
position.
Ma'am, to have a command over something. Yes, formal position, as Pratisha said.
okay,
Ma'am,
okay,
ownership of something.
okay. All right. And what do you and how can you define responsibility?
Set
When
of
it is
tasks
that becomes an
that are
obligation.
expected from you.
Obligation. Okay, it becomes an obligation on us to perform a certain task. If we are assigned that task, then
Ma'am,
it is that is our responsibility, right?
can
And
we say liabilities as responsibilities? Can we consider liabilities as responsibilities?
Liability, we can say, but then it comes in a uh, negative sense as well, because we should be doing it happily, and we should be concerned about it as well at the same time. But yes, if you have a liability, then of course you have to finish that task as well, right?
Okay, ma'am.
An authority is if I'm able to pass an order, if and if I have the right to to tell people what to do, then I have the authority. So this is how we can differentiate between authority and responsibility. So Henry Fayol suggested that there should be a balance between these two, authority and responsibility. See, authority at the end of the day should be with the manager, should be with the top management or the head of the team. But when it is the responsibility of subordinates to perform a certain job, they should also be given little authority to decide, to take decision at small levels, so that they feel that they are also part of the part of the task that they are doing, and they are not only being dictated what to do. So Henry Fayol suggested that there should be a balance between authority and responsibility. The authority should be with the managers at the end of the day, but they should also allow subordinates to to have some level of authority over the task that they are performing. Now, what will be the advantages of this, if you think? Why would Henry Fayol would have suggested this? How can it be helpful?
Ma'am, it will
Without
develop a sense of
authority,
belonging.
Yes.
yes, ma'am. Without authority, like maybe the workers, they are reluctant to abide with the orders that we pass.
Yes, you are correct. And like you mentioned, that they also feel that as a part of the job, and sometimes if they are only being dictated, they develop a different kind of a feeling. Maybe they feel dissatisfied that they don't have any right to to suggest or to take decision at even at a small level.
Ma'am, we can say that they'll not be able to, utilize their creativity. They'll
Exactly.
not be able to show their potential.
Exactly. And it's not that if somebody is at the top management, then he has all the ideas. Ideas can come from anywhere. Even the people at a lower level can give ideas. It's not that if I'm at this side, I may be having all the ideas. No, even
Ma'am,
you can suggest good ideas. Yes.
ma'am, thinking and working as sir suggested day before yesterday, they go hand in hand.
Correct. Yes. Yes. So when they are performing the task, they have some responsibility. Then maybe while doing, they may think that maybe we can do this way or that way. It would be more effective, or we can do work more efficiently. Then they should be allowed to maybe do it or suggest it, and they should have the right to express uh, the if they have some ideas, right? So that is why Fayol suggested that authority and responsibility should go hand in hand, and it should be allowed to the employees as well to have some level of authority. And it also reduces dissatisfaction. They will have a sense of belongingness, uh, and um, and if not implemented many times, of course it will increase dissatisfaction and all, but it may also lead to misuse of authority, because maybe the authority is making them do which may not be many times feasible, just maybe for various reasons. So it may also lead to misuse of authority if this is not done. And delay in decision making can also happen, because only one person is taking all the decisions, so he may not be uh, able to think uh, all the time very effectively. So decision making could also be delayed. All right. So now we come to the third principle, which is discipline. Now, discipline is here it refers to sincerity, and here it refers to obedience. towards the rules and regulations, policies of any organization. There should be discipline in an organization, Fjord suggested. And good superiors which are who are good, they always ensure that whenever there are any agreements, they are fair, and there's a judicious application of penalties. For example, if some employee has to be penalized, then there should be the in a correct manner and what is supposed to be done, not that he is penalized very higher, like degree is higher than what he is uh, expected or what he deserves. So discipline should be there so that employees may be following all the rules and policies of the organization, and there should be obedience on part of workers and management. Management should also be abiding to the rules and policies of the organization. It's not only for the employees, for everybody. Now, if it is done, how could it help the organization? If there is discipline in organization, how it is helpful for everybody?
Ma'am, an organization then will have a structure that they can follow if they're disciplined enough, both the
Mhm.
workers and the management.
Mhm.
So
They know. Yes, yes, correct.
Ma'am,
Yes,
ma'am, always the motivation cannot be there. So discipline can take you to the places where motivation cannot always.
okay, okay. Um, so basically, it will help in the smooth functioning of the organization. There will be a sense of orderliness, and of course, efficiency will be improved, like you mentioned. Okay, and if there is no discipline, if there is no people are not following any rules or policies, they may not. If there is no discipline, then employees may also, talk abusively with the management many times. So the relationship between the management and worker could be stressful. So if it is implemented, then there is also a cordial relationship between management and workers. All right. So this was the third principle given by Fayol. Now let's come to the fourth one, which is unit of command. See, a unit of command here means that there is one superior who will give the orders, and we all would be reporting to that one superior. Okay, so that is unity of command. There's unity of command, there's only one superior from whom we will receive the orders, from whom the subordinates will receive the orders, and whom they shall report. Now, if this is done, then it avoids confusion and chaos, because employees know that whom they have to follow and whom they have to report. They may not be going to different people, or it's not that if any other has given them any advice or order, they would be following it. They would be only following their boss's order. There will be clarity in the order as well. There will be clarity among relationships. It will avoid conflicts among groups, among superiors as well, because if there is one superior who is passing the order, and maybe five subordinates under him is following him, then it is okay. But if there are two superiors, then whom the subordinates going to follow? If they go to one superior one, he's saying something else. If they are going to superior two, he's suggesting something else. So there will be conflict among superiors as well, and there will be chaos also among the subordinates that what to perform. Right? That makes sense.
yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
And of course,
Yes,
if it
ma'am.
is not implemented, then also order and discipline is disturbed, because then there will be no discipline, there will be no order. Here, when there is a unity of command, there is order in which they have to follow the maybe steps. And if it is not there, they are not very clear of their boss and the orders. So the next principle is Unity of
Ma'am,
direction.
I think we'll have to stop here because the time is over.
Okay, sir. Oh, so sorry,
And
sir. I
we
didn't see
may
the
be late
time.
for the next
Yes,
class.
yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much,
Thank
sir.
you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.